everyone. My name is Sona Ekmekjian, and I'm here with a colleague, Liz Brewster, and we're here talking to you today about when less is more, when you're reimagining the sales tax practice. We are proud to be here as a strategic partner of MACPA and excited to be presenting this to you as part of the CPA Innovation Summit. So a little bit about myself. My name is Sona Ekmekjian, and I'm with Avalara. I'm the Senior Director of Global Accounting Strategic Partnerships. And I have been in the sales and use tax space for more than 28 years. I am a tax geek at heart, and I'm proud of it, and I absolutely love my sales and use taxes. I've worked for the Big Four accounting firm, for a boutique accounting firm, for software companies. So done a lot of different things in the advisory and automation space. My role here at Avalara is to work with the accounting community to service our mutual customers and accounting firms. So with that, I'm going to let Liz introduce herself.
Hey everybody, thanks for having us here today. A little bit about me. I am the Senior Vice President of Global Compliance here at Avalara. I've been with the company for just about 7 years. I bring some experience from a couple of different industries across media and semiconductor industry, really all focused on solving hard problems and figuring out how to scale platforms and technology. It's really what I love to do every day, and spend my days now partnering up with product and engineering to build tax compliance technology to help businesses of every shape and size figure out how to deal with the manual work that can be automated in the space of compliance. I really am excited to be with all of you here today, and with Sona to really talk about digital transformations, talk about what's possible with regard to reimagining, redesigning, and reinventing your sales tax practice. And we're going to kick off talking about digital transformations in general. What are they, and how can they help businesses like yours? So long before COVID, we were seeing tech trends really accelerate everywhere. And due to COVID and the fact that the majority of us now are sitting in our homes, doing webinars, doing our day-to-day activities, and many of us are schooling from home, we have had to turn to technology to really help us figure out ways to be productive, to collaborate, to learn, to get access to real-time information, and especially in order to make decisions and move our businesses forward, helping our customers, helping our clients, et cetera. And in doing so, we have effectively hit kind of that big fast forward button on a lot of technology trends that were already in place, from remote work to virtual events, thinking about things like virus monitoring, big data, and technologies that maybe were only familiar to a fringe tech community are now entering center stage. And many of those changes are likely here to stay. But what exactly is digital transformation? I would tell you it's more than just the technology. And as we think about the next slide, a couple of points here, it's about process improvement. It's about connectivity, and it's about changing the shape of business as we know it today. Digital transformations enable new ways of working, and it's more than just a benefit to the business. It's more than just a benefit to how employees interact with one another. It's equally about how we engage with the customer and how we create opportunities to approach our business in general. So regardless of each business's unique circumstance, those who are using maybe some antiquated on-premises systems or manual processes now are facing a steeper uphill climb in the changing environment, and they have an opportunity to redesign and reinvent given today's environment. The time is now to consider how you drive your own business or help your client's business operate in this new space. So a couple of fast facts really bring this point of prioritization of digital transformation right here to the foreground. This IT quote that talks about 91% of decision makers said that their business now has a digital first business strategy. Well, why is that important? Well, when I think about our IT team, I often know that they are the center of kind of creativity, digitalization, they're the enablers, et cetera. But what this stat tells me is that there are other parts of the businesses that are now connecting with the IT teams on a broader digital first strategy. And that's really, really important. Second, B2B commerce up by more than 20% since the onset of COVID. I think we all kind of intuitively know this as B2C participants. We're also exploring our own new shopping habits. It's natural to also believe that's happening in the B2B space. And last, digital interactions are 2 times more important to customers now. Why? Well, we're all shopping online. And as consumers or as businesses, we've come to expect ease of use. We've come to expect consistency. And certainly that with our favorite brands or with our favorite businesses, but even consistency in our experiences between those businesses or brands is really, really important. And as we consider digital transformation, especially in light of our working from home environment, I think about the key drivers, right, of any digital transformation within organizations kind of typically being driven by 4 or 5 general ideas. And let's flip over to the next page and talk about kind of what that looks like. First of all, I think core driver might be new market growth opportunities as businesses are growing. Some certainly are experiencing the good fortune of having that happen during COVID, while unfortunately some are not. But second, evolving customer and behavior preferences. We just talked a little bit about that, as we as buyers of things certainly have evolved our consumer preferences. Third would be increased competitive pressure. Certainly many new businesses are out and about selling through new channels and may be experiencing competitive pressure that they hadn't previously. Fourth, something that's near and dear to what I do every day, and as Sona does, considering new regulations or compliance standards and having to flex and be adaptable to those. And then last, evolving employee behavior and preferences. I don't know that it was our preference to all be working from home, but certainly it is having a big influence on us. So many, if not all of those forces are in play today in our current environment. And as the speed of digital transformation accelerates, the working environment has to adapt. And while change can be challenging, maybe even scary for some, there are a wealth of benefits to be expected for people, for business, and overall for the global economy. Locking in on the needs of our now globally dispersed workforce, I key into these 4 areas where tech and automation can really create opportunities and efficiencies by connecting workers to one another, connecting to data in real time, looking at that buyer's journey or the customer's journey, touching squarely right into customer experience. Certainly the collaboration tools that we're using to enable things like we're doing today with a webinar, ops efficiency, and then of course, finally, just that strategic use of data is really important. So let's dive into each of these one by one. And the first digital zone, if you will, to consider is really the buying automation or the customer journey. So as social distancing creates a gap between companies and customers, businesses of all sizes have to adopt to new models of engagement. Let's flip to the next slide to look at, how our solutions, how our omni-channel experiences, and how leveraging remote working models can really be beneficial across, go back one slide, if you would, can really be beneficial to businesses of any size. So the primary benefits in this space are really to reduce purchase or engagement friction. Customers have so many options, or clients have so many options these days that as you think about making the process as easy and streamlined as possible, it can promote repeat purchases and brand loyalty. Second, you can really empower your customers. Making a buying journey simple from device to device, purchase to purchase, enables them to take actions that they choose at the time best suited for them. Automation and a robust tech stack, especially in the back end, enables a lot of flexibility when you're considering a move to additional sales channel, for example, a marketplace, versus only selling on your e-commerce storefront. And then last, technology offers you scalability as your product offering might be expanding. The second area for tech to really put a boost into productivity and enable remote working would be through collaboration tools. Collaboration technologies, of course, bring data, bring mind share together, and enable your employees to work more efficiently. I'm pretty certain we're currently in the largest epicenter, like the epicenter of the biggest remote work experiment in history. I don't know that we'll get back to this again. I think personally, I'd rather continue to evolve and try to find a hybrid state here, but here we are, and this is causing us to work differently and to figure out how we can leverage tools like Slack, like Zoom, like Team, et cetera, Dropbox, maybe others, and some learning and development tools and platforms to help us achieve even unprecedented levels of learning and remote work, and also speeding decision making while we're not in the same physical space. And that also, of course, gives us, I think, on a personal level, that much needed boost of connection that we're really all missing at this time. The third area that I'd like to touch on is operational efficiency. Simply having people dependencies to do things is really nothing. It's no longer something that a business can afford. Manual processes are really an operational luxury that have to be limited, and you can do that through standardization of process and ultimately through automation. In the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic, I saw a lot of this happen, especially in the space that we're in with tax. Or in places around the globe, there was a significant reliance on people's access to systems, to paper processing, to mail delivery, and it caused all kinds of either delays or work stoppages for things like notice management, for licensing, for registration, et cetera. And as we've seen the shift happen, technology is now enabling those processes to change and evolving some very long-standing processes that have been in place, enabling both the process to happen and for the enablement of a remote workforce. In my role here at Avalara, automation and process efficiency are squarely in the middle. They are our core technical enablers of our business, and for me in particular. And it's key for my team to be able to do their jobs from anywhere in the world. I manage over a team of about 300 people around the globe. They use our automation and technology every day, and they do so to enable millions of returns to be filed for thousands of customers. And it has pushed us so far beyond managing with Excel spreadsheets. And I'm happy that's happened. And it's catapulted us right into a world of process automation. And that's a great thing. I can't imagine managing tax compliance without automation, and how challenging that would be. Growing a business would be nearly impossible for businesses like ours. The last area I want to touch on is strategic use of data. So the ability to see what is happening real time in your business, with your clients, with your customers, et cetera, is critical to efficiently plan, to make data-driven decisions, and to strategize and navigate through seemingly constantly changing environments. That notion of centralized data allows collaboration, and the easier the applications themselves are to use, the more people can leverage the technology. And of course, that results in a faster return on investment. But having that operational visibility, having that operational transparency certainly can really provide a boost to performance and productivity. And best, at least it gives you a shot at that coveted quote unquote single version of the truth that we all seek. Don't know if anybody's found it, but consolidated data certainly is an opportunity to get there. So there's a lot to consider, with digital transformations. The notion of reimagining and reinventing what's possible, quite frankly, is really exciting. And this is an awesome opportunity at the point in time that we're in as an environment, here and around the globe. And it just really gives us an opportunity to think about, how can we grow more efficiently? How can we help our clients? How can we provide a better experience while simultaneously reducing risk and doing more with what we have? And I'd love to now turn it over to Sona. I think she's going to take a dive kind of a layer deeper into the accounting industry, into our space, and talk about trends that we're seeing there and how they're lining up to this notion and topic of digital transformation. So Sona, it is all yours.
Thank you, Liz. What a great discussion. And I love the way you break down digital transformation. And when you look at the industry trends, it's really a lot of the trends were embedded in what you were talking about. Um, you know, when we think about trends, there's overarching trends and then there's accounting specific. So as a part of the next slide, let's talk about a little bit about those main trends that we're seeing. And we're in the middle of a major tailwind, right? And Avalara is not there alone. We have accounting firms there with us. We have accountants in industry and clients and prospects there with us. And we're all in the eye of the storm. And we have wind around us moving. And those are those trends. And these trends are not new, but they've been in existence. I'm sure you guys have seen this, but I will say that COVID has really accelerated a lot of these trends. E-commerce acceleration. We've talked about e-commerce and the growth in e-commerce, but Liz, you mentioned 20% B2B increase in e-commerce transactions. I mean, that's amazing, and we see it, we live it, we excel personally. Shop a lot on e-commerce as well. Cloud acceleration has been a trend, but even more so now. I think organizations who weren't in the cloud had a lot of access issue. They couldn't run their business from their home. So now they're more open to cloud solutions, and that trend will continue. Focus on ROI. Digital transformation and redesign, it's all part of who we are and our ecosystem today, but organizations are not going to adopt it if the return on that investment is not there. So I think as accountants, we need to help a lot of these organizations evaluate the ROI and guide them in the right path. Regulatory enforcement, when you look back, I think Wayfair was a good example of some regulatory changes that made major changes in our industry. But my hunch is that we're going to see a lot more regulatory enforcement once the pandemic settles down, because states are going to look for alternative revenue stream, and they're going to get really aggressive on audits to recover some of their losses. So these are the high level trends, but I also do want to focus on some of the accounting specific trends as part of the next slide. These are not in any order, but I will say that accountants were considered essential services through the pandemic. And I don't know of a single accountant that shut their computer and said, we're in a pandemic and we're going to stop. But we moved from essential to indispensable, in my opinion. And that is because our clients rely on us. Your clients rely on you. They have moved you into segments of services that you weren't there before. I will say that the accountants and the consultants that were more proactive and less reactive are the successful ones. You didn't just stop there and say, okay, I'm going to wait for some guidance from the state. A lot of accountants jumped in, tried to understand what the guidelines were by the state, tried to help their clients. And those are the ones that are leading the path and not following, and the ones that are more successful. I hit on expansion and earlier, but it really is, you are the trusted advisor to your clients. You are being asked to provide services that you may not be providing today. Your clients shut their doors and had to start selling via e-commerce. Some were even more ambitious, started selling globally. So now they expect you to support them. Their Nexus footprint has expanded, their global footprint has expanded. Now you need to support them with registration and everything else to get them to ensure that they're compliant. The other trend we're seeing is around value pricing and subscription services. When we look at the accounting industry, the lower segment was already doing this. Their clients really didn't want to pay the extreme high hourly rate, so they build them through value selling or subscription services. But what we're seeing is that even the larger accounting firms today are following that. So that's an interesting trend as well. Artificial intelligence, clearly an area that is of great opportunity as you're looking at, the whole reevaluation of the services that are being offered. There's a lot of repetitive tasks that accountants are looking to automate through artificial intelligence. Financial insights, data is a powerful thing. There's so much that data tells us about trends, benchmarking, and it's really valuable to have those insights and change how we look at the market or the services that we're providing. The last one, mindset of the millennials, that's an interesting one for me personally, because I'm an accountant and I'm very conservative, much like my peers. And what I see in the market is that a lot of the accounting firms, especially the bigger ones, they really changed how they recruit. They've changed how they train. Their mindset is changing. Reality is millennials are going to take over. And this the group is really in tune with automation. So that's really going to drive even more automation. So those are some of the high level accounting trends we're seeing, but Liz, you hit on this. Virtual collaboration is a big deal. And, I don't think we'll ever travel 6 hours for a 2-hour meeting. So that trend will continue as well.
That's a great point, Zona. I think that first bullet that you had on that last slide, just talking about, the shift to being indispensable, is so on point. And this notion of how can digital transformation support being indispensable, right? Let's automate the manual. Let's figure out where you in your practice can continue to personally add value to your clients. I just think is absolutely the right direction and trend. And there are so many phenomenal technology enablers that are out there today. You mentioned AI. Robotic process automation is something we leverage pretty significantly here at Avalara, just thinking about how do you go from an end-to-end process and really have a bot do it with high quality, as opposed to having a human do it. And that human can then be looked at for different opportunities where really it's only their mind, their analytical tools, et cetera, that can be leveraged. And that's just work that a bot can't do. So many opportunities in this particular space,
Absolutely.
to be leveraged. It's really awesome. So let's transition and talk about, in the sales tax compliance space, what can we do? How do we think about a redesign with technology? And if we move to the next slide, I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into kind of how I think about the business journey. This is kind of very similar to how you'd think about a customer journey, maybe as they're going through a buying cycle, but this is a business journey around transactional tax compliance. It's a 13-step process, 13 blue circles there on your page. And anything to me that has 13 steps just kind of intuitively feels like it needs some automation. There's some opportunity there, like too many steps. And if you think about doing all of this manually, it certainly would be a really heavy lift. But go with me here for just a minute. We're going to walk through the journey. So of course, it starts with this question of, do I or do I not have to pay taxes? And oftentimes that's where a business is going to be coming to you saying, hey, I need that expert advice. Please tell me, do I have an obligation? Do I not? And then how do I go and do that? So, the flood of questions then comes about registrations and how do I collect taxes? And, how do I think about product codes? Do I or do I not apply an exemption? How often, is there an estimate of tax due? How do invoices show up? At the very beginning stages, what's an ERP system? But, as the business moves on, of course, if they've collected tax, they have to file a return and remit those payments. How does that happen? And then, if you do get to that end state and the auditor does come knocking, how do you manage that? It's a lot of complexity just thinking about the journey that a business has to go through. And it's not just once, it happens over and over again. If any of those elements begin to change, if they're now selling into a new state, if they've added a new product, if they're going through the monthly cycle as they continue to transact with businesses or consumers, all of this has a repetitive nature to it. So let's dive a little bit deeper and talk about the current state of actual sales tax compliance from a rules perspective. So the journey is one thing, but businesses have to manage sales tax, in all of the states where they have Nexus, either through physical presence, through economic activity, through management of remote employees, et cetera, et cetera. And every locality has different rates, different rules, different boundaries. They're unique. And it's just another layer of complexity on the tax cake, if you will. And last, as businesses are now thinking about, if I can't sell from a brick and mortar store, what other opportunities do I have? And many are turning to marketplace. And of course, marketplace now comes with its own set of rules. And for businesses that have expanded beyond the borders of their country, they are now challenged with international customs and duties, thinking about how they get their product into their sellers or into their buyers' hands, regardless of the market they're in. So like I said, managing the sales tax itself gets complicated very, very quickly. And I love this next slide. Numbers are just a phenomenal way to look at telling the story of how complex tax really is and why it, quite frankly, is the perfect candidate for automation. So here's some quick facts for you. As you know, of course, tax is determined in part by where the buyer or seller is located. And there's 152 million mailing addresses out there. And to be more precise, a mailing address just might not be sufficient to cover the applicability of tax. So if you will, consider these behemoth Amazon warehouses that are out there now, and they may have one mailing address. However, that physical location that they have may cross multiple tax boundaries depending on where they are. And if Amazon were to ship from the west end of the facility versus the east end, depending on the state they're in, it may result in a different tax rate. Fun times. Second, there are 12,000 taxing jurisdictions here in the US alone. That's a lot of tax rules, tax rates, and tax boundaries to keep track of. It would be one thing if they just made the rule once and didn't change their minds, but that's not how it works. There are 131,000 fuel tax scenarios and literally hundreds of millions of product and service buyer and seller exemption possibilities. And my brain just literally gets exhausted thinking about all of that. So you say, yes, I get it, lots of complexity. But what if my client was a small business, maybe managing 10 or fewer products, maybe selling in 10 or fewer states? Well, I would tell you that, even for a company that sells into just a few states with just a few products, getting the tax rate can be challenging. In particular, of course, if you're selling into a home rule state or if you're selling online, and here is why. These economic nexus thresholds certainly vary by state, and it can quickly tally how costly it might be to manage all of that. Really, the point of this slide here is to demonstrate to you that we all like our uniqueness. States are the same way. They all like to do things differently. What works for one doesn't necessarily work for the other. And when you think about economic nexus, some states have legislation that determines a nexus based on a threshold of the number of sales, for example. Maybe it's the total volume of sales. So, is it $100,000 in sales? Maybe in some states, yes. Maybe it's 250,000 in others. Maybe it's a combination of an either or scenario where a business could reach a particular threshold in sales, or it's reached a number of retail sales in the state. So again, a lot of complexity around managing all of that data. And when you look at all of this, as we move to the next slide, it's so easy to see why that compliance burden is just tallying up to be a big cost for clients and businesses everywhere. Tax compliance is a necessity. It doesn't add to the bottom line, but it absolutely can deduct if you get it wrong. And as you think about the complexity of Wayfair, marketplace facilitators, and then all of that additional work that clients are doing around prep and file, all the while risk is going up, you understand why they would be looking and turning to their indispensable trusted tax advisor for help in managing this ever increasing compliance burden. And of course, the challenge doesn't stop at the client level. So let's move on to the next slide and look at, where accounting firms face similar issues, but oftentimes just on a completely bigger scale. So we've talked about that content element, right? Keeping up with the rates, the rules, the forms, the boundaries, et cetera. It's pervasive, it takes time, and it's an expensive proposition. Oftentimes when you think about the margins, right, to do this work, they can be really slim given the investment in that content maintenance. And sometimes the cost of the work can certainly exceed what's being charged for the service. And in fact, it is the single biggest reason firms don't offer a sales tax prep and filing service. A couple other reasons listed there in the graphic on the right-hand side. And when you think about the solutions that are available, of course, they're largely geared toward that end user, that business, not the firm who might be doing volumes of work on behalf of many, many clients. And there are quite a few challenges that come with that volume of work as opposed to doing it just on a one-for-one, business-for-business basis. Let's look at a couple of those. So I think about data aggregation, right? Let's move to the next slide. Data aggregation being one of probably the key areas of opportunity where automation can help. In today's environment, in particular, a business maybe just 9 short months ago that was out in a brick and mortar space only, maybe hadn't broached that e-commerce threshold yet, maybe not selling through marketplace yet. Now they absolutely are doing that. And so data collection for the purposes of tax aggregation, for the forms and filing and tax liability remittance can get really, really complicated. If they don't have a system on their side that's aggregating that information, you might be getting multiple sources of data. You also might be getting a little bit of disaggregation with regard to a marketplace that they're selling on and trying to figure out, did the marketplace remit on behalf of, did they not? How do we tally up all of those gross sales together, making sure that the data that the state gets is right? It certainly is a big challenge. Second, responding to state notices can really be very, very time consuming in, requiring time from your staff to get a hold of clients, to also contact jurisdictions, which fortunately today has improved over the first 3 months of COVID, where it was nearly impossible to get a hold of anyone, but nonetheless still takes time. Managing, the returns process itself, in cycle and even post cycle, making sure that returns are getting out the door, but that you've got the metadata required to file on behalf of clients can be very time consuming. And then last, certificate management. Providing the opportunity to help clients really manage and understand exemption certificates can be a cost drain versus a value add. And so as you think about redesigning that process and, imagining what is possible, the first place I would go to is, can automation save the day? Can we help businesses fulfill their tax compliance obligation accurately and timely, all while enabling staff to do other value creating activities, those indispensable activities that Sona had talked about sooner? And certainly the answer is yes. Here's a very simplified image of how Avalara, and my team in particular, does that for businesses of all sizes. If you think about, again, what we talked about, the transactions are out there and they're happening. They might be in one source system, they might be in multiple source systems, but for us, it really doesn't matter. That transactional data comes into our system. It can come in through import. Maybe the customer, the business, has a real-time connection into our AvaTax service where they're calculating tax. And that comes through the business's ERP or e-com or point of sale system. And once it's in, right, you've gone through that import process, our technology maps that data onto the requisite returns. And the business is then able to review and approve their tax liability through a really easy to use user interface. Once that's done, we move to the right and take care of the filing and the remittance to the tax authorities. And it sounds simple, but I would tell you there's a lot of automation behind that, and many, many years of development that my teams have had a hand in developing in partnership with our product engineering teams. And I would now like to hand this off to Sona to talk a little bit more about how Avalara is thinking beyond that. Again, kind of reinventing and reimagining what might be possible for accountants like yourself. Sona?
Thanks, Liz. I look at the complexity slide with the economic nexus, Liz, and it seems like every time the authorities try to simplify, they do actually the contrary and make it really difficult for consultants and accountants to really help their clients, because I think with economic nexus and the thresholds, they've even complicated things compared to before. So it's really interesting. But end of the day, I think we all agree that this is complicated. It's not just the rates, the product taxability, the rules, but it's the lack of unity and consistency across the jurisdictions. It's the different addresses. Everything complicates this. And as Liz said, as you reimagine and redesign, there's a lot of efficiency we've added to our processes internally. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys about the next section, which is how do we, as Avalara, as a software company, help you redesign what you're doing to add efficiency to your processes. As Liz said, and in my conversation to a lot of accounting firms in my role, a lot of people don't offer filing services, not because their clients don't need it, but because they see it as a high risk and low margin business. And what we're going to try to do now is take the efficiencies that we've gained over the years and share them with our accountants and enable them to file the services. So our vision is Avalara for Accountants. With Avalara of Accountants, we are going to be taking a lot of different products that we sell and license to our end customers. And what we're going to do is give it to our accounting firms. And when we talk about the accounting community, we're talking about accounting and consulting firms. We're talking about SALT experts, tax advisors, even individual accountants and bookkeepers. So the range and the size is up and down the spectrum. And we hope that we can share our best practices, our software, and help you guys grow. So how are we going to do that? As part of the next slide, we'll talk about some of the value that we'll be delivering to you. We're going to bring you accuracy. All the research we're talking about that Liz talked about, all the rates, the rules, we'll deliver that to you in a solution. And that will help you drive customer satisfaction and efficiency. When you internally don't need to research all the different components, that alone will add efficiency. You know, we're in an environment where we're all trying to do more with less, and that would promote that efficiency would be a component of that. It allows you to grow. You can take on customers without having to worry about, do I have the resources behind the scenes to deliver those services to my customers? And obviously, we're going to help you reduce the risk. And accuracy and risk kind of go hand in hand, and it drives lower risk with accuracy. But there's certain things that we'll do across the board. Liz talked about innovation a lot of times. She works with her engineering counterparts and the product team to drive efficiency and innovation and robotics and artificial intelligence to be able to scale. When you've got the volume that Liz has, you have to do that to increase your margins. So that is something that's going to continue to happen across the board. Global solutions, vertical focus on certain industries, and also uniform experience. Our goal is to promote the same experience regardless to who you are and what you're licensing from us as an organization. So under this Avalara for Accountants umbrella, what are we delivering? Well, let me tell you a little bit about that as part of the next slide. There's really two flavors of filing service we're talking about here. The first one is what you see on this screen, which is Managed Returns for Accountants, which is MRA. Just like everything else, we love our acronyms. And as you can see, it's the same process that Liz talked about that she follows internally. Get the data. It goes through this lengthy process, which is extremely simplified here. There's a review and approve. Basically, in the MRA, Avalara is going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting behind the scenes. You import the data, we do our magic, we prepare the returns, you approve it, we will file, remit, pay it, and also do the notice management. So when I say we're doing the heavy lifting, it allows you to scale significantly. Now, the second flavor of this solution is Avalara Returns for Accountants, ARA. Now, the difference here is we give you the software, we give you our best practices, we give you the automation, and you drive the process end to end. You import, you review, you approve, you file, you remit, and obviously you do the notice management. But regardless to these two flavors, you get the same product, you get the same efficiency Liz does. And these products are exclusively developed for return filers. So you have a multi-preparer dashboard. What does that mean? That means you as the preparer can be in your dashboard and see all your clients that you're responsible for. It has workflow management. It has the client data and filing calendars and all the automation. It takes care of, you don't need to log into the individual sites. It takes care of that component, stores all the passwords. There's a lot of efficiency that you get that I don't think we have the time to talk about, but wanted to give everyone a highlight of what these two products are. Others will follow, and I hope you sense the excitement in my voice because I'm really excited about this and the value it's going to bring to accountants. But what does this do to your organization? End of the day, as part of the next slide, it helps you scale. We talked about scalability. You can take on more clients. It increases your productivity, helps you automate, and obviously increase the value to your clients. So as you're looking to redesign and offer more services, your clients are pushing you there. I think a lot of accounting firms have pushed back because they couldn't scale. But here's a mechanism by which you can take on these services without having to worry about the technology, the scalability, and efficiency.
Sona, can I jump in for a second?
Sure.
I'd love to add something to what you just said. I think, when you listen to what you just said about scale and, addition of clients, the productivity element, all of that, I think about as we go back to that 4-frame slide of how are digital transformations impacting businesses of any shape and size. And you can put this note of managed returns for accountants, MRA, ARA, as you've said, we like our acronyms, back into that frame of 4. This offering touches on each and every one of those areas of opportunity. You as an accountant, in a practice, think about the ease and simplicity of, single sign-on, ability to leverage an easy to use interface that's consistent, all the things that we said are really important to the journey of a user. That's one. Second, collaboration tools, really phenomenal collaboration tools to ensure that, regardless of whether you're in Topeka, Kansas, or, out somewhere in Rhode Island, you've got the same access to tools, you're able to collaborate, et cetera. The efficiency stuff I'm not going to hammer on because, that's what I use every day. And certainly I know it's going to afford you some efficiency. But the data centricity piece of it, the ability to capture insights across your practice for the clients that you're serving as you look at this, I really think are phenomenal. So just offering that back to you as a way to bring that all the way back up to the digital transformation definition that we talked about earlier and putting it into that context.
Makes perfect sense, Liz. Absolutely. Awesome. So as we move on to the next section, we're going to talk about how you redesign technology with certificate management. And before, Liz, you dive into it, I will say that this is an interesting area. As an auditor, I loved going into companies that were wholesalers or manufacturers because you always find issues. And auditors walking into organization, they assume everything is taxable unless proven otherwise through an exemption certificate. So if you're being audited 3 years later, good luck going back and getting those certificates. And I will also say that this is an area that as accountants, there's a lot of consulting opportunity in this area because this is an area that clients need your help. They need you as a trusted advisor. So with that, I'll let you, Liz, talk a little bit about exemption certificate management.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's move on to the next slide. You all might recall that 13-step journey. Remember those 13 blue bubbles that were on your page that I showed you earlier? This is a bit of a simplified and condensed version of that, really focusing in on the center. So we've already assumed we've got an obligation to collect and remit. We've registered. We're now in the process of transactional tax compliance. And so layered over the top of it, of this image, really is just an opportunity to think about the tools that we have, the SaaS-based technology that enables that process to really be seamless, to be automated, to be repeatable, to be consistent. And as Sona just touched on, we've talked about the AvaTax side, the tax calculation and the returns, but of course we know upstream of that, managing certificate exemptions can be extremely time consuming for businesses. It can be really confusing if not done well. Of course, it opens up the opportunity for auditors to come in and wreak all kinds of havoc for businesses. So when we think about automation and the opportunity that it affords to do more with what you have, this particular area is really, really ripe for that opportunity. From a technology perspective, again, how does this all work? Well, the technology that we enable with a business certainly allows this all to happen digitally. So as the request for a purchase comes in, the question of, where is the purchase happening? All the normal questions you would think about from a tax calculation perspective also has to consider, to whom are you selling? And if the entity to whom you're selling is an exempt entity, you have to create a record of that on a per transaction basis. And gosh, I think about back in the day, for me back in like the 70s, just the enormous filing cabinets of paper documents that businesses had to have, well into the 80s and 90s, if they were doing lots of exempt transactions. It's really just mind blowing. And all of that can be handled digitally today, and stored and associated with the actual transaction, so that when an auditor does come knocking, which invariably they will, the ability to go and source digitally the information and substantiate the transactions and taxability becomes a heck of a lot simpler. So let's move on and talk about, what are some of the common business triggers for certificate management, and how can you help your clients? Well, I've listed quite a few. I'm going to touch on just a couple here of these most common ones. And oftentimes, I like to think about M&A activity. It's a big one that can certainly drive exemptions, and changes to exemption status. The second one would be, a recent ERP purchase or maybe an upgrade, right, that the business is going through. And it's an opportunity to think about, how do I change? How do I reimagine? How do I redesign what the environment I'm operating in could be? And last, when a business, of course, expands what they sell, to whom they sell, what channel they're selling through, so much of that is happening right now. It might be another opportunity to think about where that certificate management process could play a role, and how could automation help that process. Sometimes those trigger events can be really evident to your client, but maybe not so much to you. And so here are just a couple ideas of things that you might be aware of and can think about as you're engaging with your clients, and really putting two and two together to think about the possibility of what a certificate management system might be able to do for them. So number one, has your clients had a recent Nexus study? Did that identify and reveal new Nexus obligations in state? Again, very frequent opportunity that's happening right now, as economic nexus rules, have been created in the past 2 years, and some of which are actually even changing real time. So certainly an opportunity there. Number two, does your client really have a solid understanding around certificate management in general, or do they not? And what exposure or opportunity does that create for them? Have they been audited in the past? Certainly an interesting point of view to come from. And what processes did they have then that they've changed or automated, or maybe they haven't? And then last, kind of assessing their general understanding, not just around certificate management, but sales and use tax rules and requirements. And that might be able to give you a good indication of how clear or consistent their processes are or are not. And if they are lacking, certainly an opportunity to have automation come and help save the day. So when I think about a couple of questions, if you don't know that information from past engagements, a couple of questions you might be able to ask your clients to help assess a potential automation fit would be the following. And let's move to oh, there we go. We're on that slide. Sorry, it happened before I knew it. So first of all, understanding demand, right? What percent of their customers or their transactions, I guess would probably be a better way to look at it, are exempt, right? Is it a high volume? Is it a low volume? Do they really have that need for automation? Or is that growing or changing? Do they expect it to grow and change in future periods? Does the client have good, reliable, again, kind of going back to process? Are their processes documented? Do they understand what they're doing? Are they consistent? Can they produce high quality? Or do you see risk there? And then last, are they selling or going to be selling potentially B2B? Interesting statistic that we talked about earlier, just around B2B sales, up 20% for e-commerce. Lots of opportunity there for businesses to kind of reshape the buyer opportunity and buyer experience and to whom is buying their product. So it definitely could be a trigger. And all said, capturing these data points really does help you assess exposure. It helps you assess risk. It helps you determine fit for an automation solution now or in the future for your clients. All right, so I know we are coming to the end, and I also know that was a lot to consume in a very short period of time. So I'd just like to leave you with a couple of takeaways. I realize, of course, all of you are a tremendous source of trusted tax material for clients, and an indispensable, as Sona said, resource for your clients as well. So these links, these sources are here for you to leverage if and when you need them. And as you know, as we've talked about today, there's always a lot going on in the world of tax. It can be challenging to stay on top of it all, while also trying to consider how to help your clients grow, become more efficient, reduce risk, provide a great employee and great customer experience. Should you have questions that we have not touched on today, have not answered, of course, we are available. Please feel free to reach out to us, contact us at the email shown here, accountants@avalara.com. And on behalf of Sona and myself, we thank you for your attendance today and look forward to chatting with you soon.
Bye. Thank you.